In this video, we're continuing to look at simplifying surds. If you're coming to this video, can you please make sure you've watched part 1 first, where there are 4 examples to start us off. So the first one we're looking at now is 3 root 2 times by, I'll zoom in, 3 root 2 times by 5 root 2. Now, this is multiplying two surds together. Think of this in 2 bits. Think of this as a multiplying of the normal numbers, 3 and the 5, and then multiplying the surds, the root 2 times the root 2. If you wanted to, you could write all these times signs in, first off, and just put times signs between everywhere. And when you're timesing numbers, it doesn't matter what order you're doing them in, so you could have the 3 and the 5 being times together, and then the root 2 and the root 2 being times together. Now, you wouldn't normally bother writing it out like that, but you could do. Because what I'm going to do is my 3 times by 5 is 15. My root 2 times my root 2. Well, if we think to what we did earlier when we were splitting things up, we can do the opposite here. Root 2 times root 2 is 2 times by 2 rooted. You can, if you're timesing two surds together, you can times them together and then root them. Remember, this 15 and that is being multiplied together. So I get 15 times by root 4. The square root of 4 is 2. 15 times by 2 is 30. So that's the final answer here. Now, you wouldn't normally write it out in as much detail as that. If we go back to the top where we had 3 root 2 times 5 root 2, what you could normally just say is, okay, let's look at the normal numbers first, the numbers that aren't in the square root sign. 3 times by 5, that's 15. Then I've got to do root 2 times by root 2. Any square root times by the same square root always gives you the number itself. So root 2 times root 2 is 2. For example, root 7 times root 7 would be 7. So I've got my 3 times by 5, that's my 15. Root 2 times by 2, root 2 is 2. So I get 15 times by 2, and that's 30. And that's usually as much as you'd write in one of these questions. Anyway, we'll go on and look at another example. So example number 6 is going to be root 18 times by root 8. So root 18, first thing we need to do is try and change that into another set of numbers, a pair of numbers, with two numbers multiplied together to get 18. Well, one of them is a square number. So 18 is the same as 9 times by 2. And 8 is the same as 4 times by 2. So I can simplify these surds first of all, same way as we've done previously. I can then split these up into root 9 times root 2, and over here root 4 times root 2, and they're all being times together. Root 9 is 3, I'll leave that root 2 in there for the time being. Root 4 is 2, and I'll leave that root 2 in there. So next, dealing with the normal numbers, the numbers that aren't inside the square root sign. 3 times 2 is 6. And root 2 times root 2, because it's the same square root times by itself, that is just 2. So what did I use there? I used the fact that square root of 2 times the square root of 2 equals 2. That's the fact I've used over there. 6 times by 2, that's 12. So that's the final answer for that question. If we look at another example, number 7, again we've just got to simplify these surds, and I've got root 2, and then in brackets, root 12 plus root 8. Well, let's work out how we can simplify the root 12 and the root 8 first. 12 is 4 times by 3, and 8 is 4 times by 2. So I can change the bracket to 4 lots of 3 square rooted and 4 lots of 2 square rooted. The 4 lots of 3, remember I can change to root 4 times by root 3. And over here, this will be root 4 times by root 2. It's in my bracket, and I've still got my root 2 outside my bracket. So root 4 is 2. So I have 2 lots of root 3 plus 2 lots of root 2. And I've got my root 2 outside my bracket as well. Now I need to do some multiplying out. I can't add these two together here because I can't add 2 root 3's onto 2 root 2's and make 4 root 3's or anything like that, because the root 3 here and the root 2 are different things. So what I can do here is multiply this bit here together. So 2 times root 3 times by root 2. Well, the normal number is just 2. Root 3 times by root 2 is root 6. And I'll just leave it like that. Root 2 times by root 3 is root 6, because 2 times 3 is 6. Then I'll multiply that root 2 by this 2 root 2. So I've got a normal 2 there. Then I've got a root 2 here times by another root 2 here. If you think back to earlier, we've already said root 2 times root 2 is just a normal 2. So over here, I've got this 2, and that root 2 and that root 2 make another 2. So I've got 2 root 6 plus 4. And that is the answer to that question.